Polynesian Voyagers. The epic journeys of the ancient Polynesians inspired the 2016 Disney movie Moan. Starting about 3,000 years ago and using ocean-going catamarans, they colonized New Zealand, Hawaii, Rapa Nui, Easter Island, and everything in between. Their network of islands, now referred to as the Polynesian Triangle, was larger than modern-day Russia. The Polynesians almost certainly made it to South America before Columbus. Sweet potatoes, which are native to South America, were being cultivated on Managua Island and Hawaii centuries before European contact. In 2007, chicken bones dating from 1321 to 1407 were discovered in Chile. Although there is not yet DNA evidence to prove a link, Polynesians were known to bring the tasty birds around the Pacific. An analysis of Rapa Nui Islanders showed that DNA from South America appeared in their gene pool somewhere between 1300 to 1500 AD. But how did it get there? Some believe South Americans sailed over on balsa wood rafts. Thor Heyerdahl famously sailed a reproduction from Peru to Rapa Island in 1947, but many experts believe that the superior vessels and sophisticated wayfinding of the Polynesians, still used today, is much more likely. Japanese fishermen. In the late 1960s, Ecuadorian businessman Emilio Estrada led an excavation of Valdivia, a 5,000-year-old archeology site in Ecuador. There was a large amount of strange pottery, so he wrote a letter to Betty Muggers at the Smithsonian Museum to help identify them. She replied that they looked like 5,000-year-old Jomon pottery from Japan. But how could Japanese ships sail all the way to Ecuador? They might have been aiming for it. The Kuroshio Current has been known to push Japanese fishing junks out to sea, leaving the crew to drift for months. In 1815, a junk was washed ashore near Santa Barbara, California with 3 crew members still alive after 17 months at sea. In 1843, another appeared on the Mexico coast with 2 traumatized fishermen still inside. The Kuroshio does not have a direct line to Ecuador, but there seem to be some DNA markers and unique viruses in the area hinting that a Japanese junk might have bested the odds. If so, those Japanese fishermen beat Christopher Columbus by about 4,500 years. Irish monks. Not long after the death of St. Patrick, another Irish saint was in town. St. Brendan was nicknamed the Navigator for his voyages to Scotland, Wales, and Brittany to spread Christianity. In the 9th century, a semi-mythical, semi-historical account of his voyage became a medieval bestseller. In the Voyage of St. Brendan, St. Bernthus tells Brendan that he has just returned from paradise, a land far beyond the western horizon. Brendan decides that he needs to see it for himself. He assembles a crew, a leather-bound Irish Irish boat, and some divine goodwill before setting out. The crew travels through a mystical world, including hell, where great demons threw down lumps of fiery slag from an island with rivers of gold fire. Could this be a reference to Iceland? And if the Irish reached Iceland, could they have followed the Viking path all the way over to Newfoundland? To test this theory, historian and adventurer Tim Severin successfully sailed a leather-bound Irish boat from Ireland to the New World in 1976. So, it is possible. English merchants. In 1475, medieval codfish conglomerate the Hanseatic League refused to sell cod to the British port of Bristol. The English, who love fish, immediately started looking for a workaround. A wealthy customs official named Thomas Croft several funded fish-finding expeditions led by merchant John Jay, whose plan was to find a mythical fog-hidden land west of Ireland called High Brazil. The official record says, unsurprisingly, that they didn't find it. But shortly afterward, Bristol started importing a suspicious amount of fish. Thomas Croft was arrested for illegal trading, only to be acquitted at trial. So where were the fish coming from? In 1956, a letter written by a spy for the Spanish Inquisition was discovered in the Spanish National Archives. It is considered certain, the spy wrote, that the cape of the said land was found and discovered in the past. By the men from Bristol who found Brazil. If the Bristol fishermen discovered the rich cod stocks off Newfoundland, they would understandably want to keep it an industry secret. Too bad Christopher Columbus spilled the beans. A Moorish daredevil. The Arab historian Abu al-Hassan Ali al-Masudi, who lived from 896 to 956, described in his famous history book The Golden Meadows that a Moor named Koshkash had sailed into the Atlantic. Nobody knew for a long time what had become of them, he wrote. At length they returned with rich booty. Although the book fails to mention where Koshkash got his booty, Muslim scholars have suggested he traveled to the Caribbean islands over 600 years before Columbus. In the 1960s, a container of many Roman and 8th century Arabic coins was found washed up off the coast of Venezuela. These were used in medieval Europe, leading some to consider this evidence for Koshkash's voyage. But there is very little information about the coins, including, as one researcher put it, whether the container was a ceramic amphora or a pickle jar. Two Venetian brothers and a Norwegian nobleman. In 1558, Nikolai Zeno published a best-selling book of letters that he claimed had been in his family archive for generations. They were from his great-great-great-grandfather Antonio Zeno and his great-great-great-uncle Nikolai Zeno, who wrote about their adventures traveling the Arctic. In 1380, Nikolai Zeno sailed from Venice to Flanders. From there, according to the text, he was shipwrecked on an island called Friesland and rescued by a prince named Zucchini, who was in the business of conquering everything in sight. Nicola wrote to his brother Antonio and together they helped Zucchini win lots of battles against defenseless islanders. The book also included a map they supposedly drew, which is a semi-accurate depiction of northern Scotland, Iceland, and Greenland. Modern theorists suggest that Zucchini is a very misspelled Orkney, as in Henry Sinclair, Earl of Orkney, and that the islands mentioned are similarly butchered names for islands in the North Atlantic. It's also been suggested that Henry Sinclair and the Zeno brothers sailed beyond Greenland and followed the Viking path to Nova Scotia, over a century before Columbus. In 1998, the Prince Henry Sinclair Society of North America unveiled a monument at his supposed landing spot in Canso, Nova Scotia in the hope it would draw tourists. A Roman explorer. In 1933, a tiny terracotta statue head was excavated at an archaeology site in Calixtlahuaca, Mexico. The face was beaded, with decidedly non-Mexican features and wearing a truncated cap. Ernest Bushranger, a specialist in classical archaeology, examined the head and declared it to be of 2nd or 3rd century Roman origin. But how could a Roman head end up at an archaeology site occupied from 1300 to 800 BC? One theory is that the statue head was placed on the site as a joke. Dr. John Paddock used to tell his classes at the Universidad de las Americas that it had been planted by Hugo Modano, a student who worked at the site. It also could have been a mix-up in the paperwork, since archaeological standards in the 1930s were a tad bit looser than they are today. Or, a theory that has yet to be disproven, it could be evidence that a Roman made their way to Mexico in pre-Columbian times. Chinese treasure ships. In the early 1400s, China was the world's greatest naval power. Their treasure ships were described as the size of the World War I vessel USS Minnesota and traveled throughout southern Asia, the Indian Ocean, the Persian Gulf, and the east coast of Africa. If the Chinese had wanted to cross the Pacific, they certainly could have. Former submarine commander Gavin Mendez believes that a Chinese treasure fleet commanded by Zhang He went further than the others, exploring Australia, the Caribbean, and even leaving settlements in South America. But he had little evidence to support these claims until Chinese lawyer Liu Gang found an old map in a Shanghai second-hand bookshop that showed North and South America in surprising detail. The map contained a note saying it was a 1763 copy of a 1418 original, about the date Mendez had claimed. The cartography community considers the map to be a fake. China and Hong Kong are full of ancient texts that can be bought on street corners, and the map is filled with naming errors, including a modern Chinese spelling of Mohammed. Not exactly ironclad evidence for a transcontinental voyage. But further proof might be out there. A Mali emperor. Mansa Musa ruled the Islamic Empire of Malian was so wealthy that when he went on his 1324 pilgrimage to Mecca, he gave away so much gold that the price dropped internationally. But when asked about his brother Abu Bakr II, who held the throne before him, Mansa Musa said, "The ruler who preceded me did not believe that it was impossible to reach the extremity of the ocean that encircles the earth, meaning Atlantic, and wanted to reach that, and never to return nor to give a sign of life." Malian scholar Al-Sudaya believes that the reason Ali Bakr II never came back is that he landed in Brazil. Specifically, the city of Recife, whose other name of Pernambuco might be an aberration of the Moan name for the rich gold fields of the Mali Empire. He also cites chemical analyses stating that the gold on American spears might have come from Mali, and a report by Christopher Columbus saying that he had encountered black traders on his voyages. Whether Abu Bakr II made it to Brazil or drowned in the Atlantic Ocean, his heir Mansa Musa took the throne and became the greatest emperor in Mali history. Basque whaler. In 1530, the Basque were whaling in Newfoundland. In 1535, when Jacques de Cartier discovered the St. Lawrence River, he found about 1,000 Basque fishing boats already harvesting cod. This makes them the first Europeans to settle in the area after the Vikings. The Basque are a unique group of people that live on the border of France and Spain. They are culturally unique, and their language Euskera has no similarities to those of their neighbors, so they don't do a lot of talking to outsiders. Shipbuilders and seafarers for centuries, they were expert navigators and fishermen. Either the Basques swooped in the moment Columbus came back, or they had a head start, perhaps from chasing whales across the Atlantic. After all, they were extraordinarily good at preserving fish for long voyages. There may yet be a pre-Columbian Basque settlement waiting to be discovered in Newfoundland.